3 novels: Almost Snow White, Hating Heidi Foster, and The Emancipation of Evan Walls. He is an Emmy Award-winning television director and a 2016 inductee to the Virginia Communications Hall of Fame. During a 34-year career at NBC News, Jeffrey directed a decade of Meet the Press, The Today Show, NBC Nightly News, and major special events. He was a contributor for HuffPost and has been published in the Washington Post, thegrio.com, and other publications, commenting on issues of race, social justice, and writing. He is also an award-winning documentary scriptwriter for films and interactive that are now on display in the Smithsonian Museum of African American History and Culture, the Museum, America I Am, the African American imprint at the National Constitution Center, the Museum at Bethel Woods, at the site of 1969 Woodstock Music and Arts Fair, and others. Recently, Jeffrey earned his university's Alumni Achievement Award, the VCU Alumni Star, for his professional achievements as a director at NBC, scriptwriter, and author. Born and raised in Smithfield, Virginia, he now lives in Washington, D.C. And without further ado, please give a warm welcome to Jeffrey Blount.
Good morning, everyone. Nice to be here with you all. I love getting places where people enjoy books and enjoy the power of the written word, and I like to honored always to be a part of the process. So I want to talk to you today about my book, Mr. Jimmy from Around the Way, and I want to give you a little bit of a history lesson of how it came to be and how I came really to discover some things about myself as a writer. And this starts with me in my car driving one day, and I'm listening to the radio, and I hear an author discussing the origin of ideas. And when she was asked where she found the ideas for her novel, she said the ideas are just everywhere. But she said, I don't actually find the ideas for my novels, they find me. She asked her audience to imagine an infinite number of tiny but brilliant lights that surround each and every one of us every moment of every day, much like the fairies that populate the themes of children's stories. And she said, these idea fairies are floating around us looking for people whose creative hearts and minds are always open and always, always searching. And they find that compatible spirit, they land on that person's shoulder and create what we know of as the light bulb moment. And she said, historically speaking, the light bulb moments are the moments when our greatest works of art, literature, and music are born. Now I turn down the radio because that's a lot for me. This is out there. And I have questions, the first of which is, what was she smoking? Because that's some real 1960s flower child kind of philosophy. But she's on NPR, so I figured somebody had decided we needed to hear from her. We could learn something from this. I just wasn't getting it. I think it was the ideas fairies that was trying to help. So I decided to go to a friend of mine who I worked with for more than 20 years at NBC. Susan is one of the most level-headed people I know. She's also a painter and a fine writer herself. So I tell her about the idea fairies. And I hear this on the phone. And I say, Susan, what's this sigh for? She said, it's comfort, it's relief. And I said, relief from what? She said, relief that finally there's somebody out there who feels the same way I do. I know exactly what this woman's talking about. This happens to me, and when it does, I am compelled to be creative. These things come to me, and they don't stop counting me until I do something creative about it, whether I'm painting or writing. Sometimes it happens to me so much, I get overwhelmed. And I was, well, that doesn't happen to me. I feel like I'm a creative person. I certainly don't get overwhelmed. But it came from Susan, so I thought, I better think some more about it. I'm a journalist, and now I got this story. I got to look into it, even if it's a story about me. I got to dig deeper. And as it turns out, things do come to me and ask me to be creative about it. I just never thought of it that way. I was thinking of me being in the car again. I'm turning onto a street that I'm going to, and my GPS lady speaks to me. She says, you have turned onto the destination road. And I have a light bulb. I heard Destination Road, and I'm thinking, that's a title. And right away, I start spinning. I've got characters, I've got settings, I've got all this stuff happening to support this title that I'm going to take to my agent and say, Marty, This wonderful thing happened. I just heard 2 words, destination road, and all of a sudden I got this policy, this thing coming together for this tower. You gotta hear about it. Well, it's still spinning. It didn't really go anywhere. It's still spinning up here. So let me tell you one that actually came to fruition that taught me something. My daughter Julie is 33 years old. When she was in 2nd grade, she met Emily. She and Emily became this, and Emily became our second daughter. The stories in the freshman year of their the fall of their senior year of high school. We have a kitchen and an open family room yard. It's a nice open space. And this particular night, 17 seniors were in this class, were in this kitchen area. And they were making a vat together. So my wife Jean and I knew it was going to be messy, extremely loud, and just fun. But we loved it because over their high school career, they chose our house as a safe place to come and do these things. So I walked down into the main lane. Julie's over here, Emily's over there. Julie looks at Emily, Emily looks at Julie. Julie makes a face, Emily makes a face. Julie laughs, Emily laughs. Julie waves and turns, and Emily does the same thing. I had a light bulb. I went upstairs to Gina and I said, do you know that Julia and Emily are like an old married couple? They just had a conversation and never said a word. Light bulb moment. It would not let me go because I recognized something special. And I realized that creatively, the way I could speak to this was through my words, and I had to write a book for them to remember the power of their friendship. I wanted them to grow up and move from apartment to apartment, house to house, and they would have to take that book and put it in a box and then put it on the shelf. And every time they held it, they would know it was dedicated to them and their friendship and the power of friendship in general. So that's where that light bulb went to. So in the same conversation, Susan and I had discussed the issue of whether or not you're born with this feeling to, be open to these kinds of ideas. You would hear during a football game or something, the announcers would say, you can see all that God-given talent on display. Is that what we had, this God-given talent? So I thought about, what if I'm a humanities guy, so what if I was a Mr. Spock kind of guy, and it was all about logic and science? And I walked in and saw that moment between my daughter and a friend. Would I feel the kind of thing I felt, emotional pull and desire to do something more? Or would I just, as a father, notice that and then maybe talk about it at Thanksgiving, but wouldn't go further? I don't know. But I kept thinking, I'm a journalist, I kept thinking, this is not enough, there's something more. I need to know why I am with this group of people who seem to be open to the idea of theirs. So after some consideration, a lot of reflection, I come up with 2 reasons. The first is environment. I was raised on a small farm in Smithville, Virginia. And if you grew up on a farm and work on a farm, you spend a lot of time alone. I think about all the hours others have. My father spent alone through years on that farm. But when I was little, it was my turn to go out with my brothers into the field by myself and do my part of the family job. I would go out and become one with nature while I was chopping weeds out of the peanuts and looking at clouds. I can remember that the call of the morning dove became my favorite bird call during that time. But the other thing I did was I took stuff into the field with me to think about it. So like at school, if so-and-so had an argument with so-and-so and called so-and-so a name and that person was hurt, and why did you feel you would get up in the morning and say those kinds of things, and what makes us do these things to each other? I was on the field trying to figure this out. I go to church on Sunday. I take Reverend Williams' sermons into the field with me to try to decide what he was talking about, and if it said anything about my life. By this time, I started loving to read paper. I would take columns out into the field and try to figure out if these columns really helped me contextualize my life. And so what I thought about now as I'm reflecting is that I wasn't just waiting for ideas. I got to the point where as a kid, I was craving ideas. And so maybe my environment could be a situation that forced me to be open to these things coming to me. The second thing was mentorship, right time, right place. I'm a freshman in college. We're about a month in, there are already 2 English papers. The first one I get an A+, The second one, like they come to my office and say, now I know what the problem is in my head. I think that the professor, she's decided that I'm a country bumpkin. There's no way I can have this vocabulary, no way I can write like this, no way I can contextualize like this. And so she thinks that I'm taking this, that I've stolen this. Well, I know I have it. And I know my second paper is better than the first. So I'm going to her with my attitude in place to defend myself. And I walk in, I sit down, and I have never been more ready to challenge an adult than I was at home. And then she said, you don't belong in my class. It's just stomach, she said. You write too well if you're in my class, you're not going to get anything out of the class. I didn't know what to say. And we continued the conversation, and she said, I know kids like you've been doing poetry, and I know I'll be writing short stories, and I threw up my hand like I was still in class and to say, actually, I'm trying to write my first novel. And she said, well, that's it. That's what we're going to do. That's your homework from now on. You're going to work with a novel. Instead of going into the classroom where you're not getting anything, you're going to come to my office 2 hours every week. And we're going to sit at that desk. We're going to work on plot, characters, all of this stuff. You're going to work on your novel. And I have this friend you need to talk to because he's a published writer. He loves talking about writing. He's got a lot to say, and you need to hear from him. So I call him up and ask him the question that everybody asks when you're trying to become a writer. What piece of advice do you give to a would job? And I had my long yellow legal pad, remember those, and my pen ready to keep up if he had a whole lot to say. Well, he offered me one word. He said, listen. And there was a awkward silence. Finally, I realized he was letting the word do. He wanted me to feel. And then he said, Jeffrey, when you were going to be writing a conversation in a bar, how would you go about doing it? Before I could answer, he said, this is what you should do. You should go into that bar, sit down, get a beer, and not speak to anybody. Just absorb the atmosphere. Feel what it's like to be in that space. And then I want you to do something really. I want you to really strong on deep this conversation. And so I want you to hear the words that you're saying. And then I want you to see if the words match the eye language. I want you to see if the words match the relationship positivity. I want you to see that the words match what's going on in the outlines. Because he said to me, I had no idea what he was talking about at this time. Every word you spoke is deep in the superficial share. And I thought, okay, I mean, the question says it was deeper than that, right? But it would take me time to get to it. But this was, so environment and mentorship, I believe, were the things that made me capable or gave me the ability to absorb these creative urges or the idea of errors. Now, this only happened a couple of years ago, so I felt really bad that I was in my 60s by the time I figured this out about myself. Because a friend of mine's daughter, who was in her mid-20s, a musician, recently posted on Instagram, I promised myself to always listen when creative urges come knocking on the door of my soul. And I was upset. She died at 28 years old. So, who knows where she's going. It took me all this time to get this. But upon a little more reflection, what I knew was each of those, my first 3 books, Elmer Snow White, Katie Mighty Coster, written for Juliet and Emily, and The Emancipation of Evan Walls, almost started with one light bulb moment. And it seemed pretty simple. There was one thing that happened to me, I was driven to write and finish these projects. Mr. Jimmy from around the West would be a much different story, much more complicated. It begins on March 7, 2020. I fly home from Texas from the book event. I'm supposed to go back out for 2 days, but my publicist calls and said, I'm sorry to tell you, we got this thing COVID and shut down, everybody's canceled it. So Gina and I do what everybody else says. We circle the family wagons to try and protect ourselves. Our kids are away. You don't see them for, my daughter for 16 months, and son for 11 months. And we just began to take care of each other. Well, I have a back porch that I love, where I can hear both going dog. I could find myself reflecting like I did when I was a kid in the field. It's where I do a lot of writing. So I put my feet up and I started calling some friends and we talked about writing. And then I discovered something about myself and something that was stirring going on in writing. There were books that were halfway finished or 3/4 of the way finished, but COVID started. And it just stopped in place. One could not find the idea of the creative spirit that was going. I think we all had to get used to the rhythm or whatever we call the rhythm of COVID before we could find that creative spirit here. I was negotiating with COVID. If you could just give me a little bit so I can squeeze one book out of here, you know, if you could let me find it one more time and get one book out, what would I write about? What would I want the legacy to be about? I know by now I started calling myself a literary activist. So all my work had to mean something, you know, I'm telling a story. So what was just going to be about? So I put my feet up and waited for the IP fairs, and it turns out they're like a tooth fairy. If you stay up waiting for them, you don't get your money. They don't know. So I just relaxed, and you know, I thought about when I was a high school football player, and you were pressing, and it wasn't coming right, and coach would say, "Stop forcing it. Just let the game come to you." So I put my feet up and waited. Now my father was 94 at the time. My mother was 91, and she was in a facility. She had dementia. And my dad was home on the farm by himself. So we're all calling him all the time, trying to keep company and keep talking. And with me, he loved to go back in time. He always wanted to talk about when the time when my mom was not sick and when the 3 boys were home. So one day he started talking about me in 2nd grade. And when I was in 2nd grade, my superpower was reading. I was reading well beyond my grade level. If you had asked me then, I would have been able to tell you what a good reader I was, even in 2nd grade. So one day, a boy walks into class, and he's a big boy. And as it turns out, he's almost twice our age. He's 13, we're all 7. We could be his younger sibling. He walks into the classroom carrying the same books that we carry for 7th graders. And he sits down, listens for each teacher. And as it turns out, I called him John Doe, who's 13, as I said, and he was from a farm family, like mine. But his small farm was small enough that his parents thought that they needed the kids to work on to make it by. So he had never been to school, John 13, and so now he was sitting like all these 2nd graders, and it must have been incredibly weird. So Mrs. Moore, because of my superpower, makes me this reading club. She's got the bigger job of helping to learn to read, but whenever there's a break in curriculum, I'm reading with John. When the kids go out for recess, I'm spending part of the time reading with John. Now this goes on for a year. And I like John. We did along great, but I was also 7 and I wanted my recess. And I wanted my time when the other kids were playing checkers, I wanted to play checkers. My father reminded me that I was 15 when they came clean. They said to me then, we knew about John before he came into the classroom. We bought the books that he carried into the classroom. We bought the clothes that he was wearing because we didn't want him to show up in the crate their clothes that they had to be embarrassed. It was already going to be tough enough for him to be in this class with little kids who were brighter and had more intellectual capacity right now as he had. And so we did that for him. Now, at 15, I was smart enough, even as a teenager, to recognize that at the time that John happened, my father was a small farmer, my mother was a church kindergarten teacher. They didn't have money. They had 3 boys of their own. So they stretched during this time to do that. And so I thank them. I was, you know, whatever reason I was able to recognize what was happening and even at the key to say thank you for doing that for John. And they said, don't thank us too soon because we have to tell you that we're the ones who went to Ms. Moore and asked you to be the reader to it. And I said, well, why did you do that? They said, well, it was your turn. The brothers had their time, and now it's your turn to learn and know this, that you are in this world not just for yourself. You are in this world as you understand and to see when your fellow human beings are in need. And then my parents said this, in one word that I always remember. It is your duty then you sue to step up and make a difference. And so I had a life goal to carry us back. My father had given me a remembrance of him trying to teach me about kindness and what that meant in our lives. And as I said, I think of myself as a literary activist. After that conversation with my dad, I came up with this phrase that I kept in my head as I wrote: the activism of kindness. The activism of kindness. That was the legacy of this book. Then things started to happen. I'm having a conversation with Jean. Now, Jean had been an ABC News correspondent. She covered the State Department for 8 years, and then she was an anchor correspondent with CNN for 20 years. She's traveled the world. She's been in war zones. She's been in, all kinds of great summits with world leaders. And, she's seen the best of people. She's been in developing countries where she's seen the worst. And so she and her crew were down in Louisiana. I didn't even remember what the story was. I remember her call. They had gotten lost, and they went to a neighborhood, and on the other side of this neighborhood, she pulled over, found the phone and called. And this hard-nosed journalist wife of mine was on the verge of tears when she said to me, "We went to a neighborhood, Jeffrey, that you can't stop." I had no idea, and I'm ashamed that I had no idea that there was this kind of poverty in my United States. I'm ashamed that I didn't know this, but that we weren't reporting on this by the face. So, well, when we were remembering that, it sent me back into journalism. And I was just intrigued by this. I called my father. We talked about rural poverty in Virginia. And I then started calling some friends throughout the South. And I consider myself a Southern writer. I grew up in Virginia. I have my friend Slim in Moss Point, Mississippi, says I can only be an honorary Southern from Virginia. But I consider myself a Southern. So all of my books really have a Southern setting, and I wanted this one to be that. So I started doing this research through reporters and columnists, friends I knew around the South. Then I started doing my own personal research. And one day I was looking at YouTube. I wanted to look for a documentary about poverty in the rural South. And I find this video that isn't a professional documentary, but it is a woman who is walking through this neighborhood for whatever reason with her family camera. And maybe she's trying to do what Jean thought should be done, make people see what's going on. So she's talking to a man, probably mid to late 30s, tall, even out of kind of a regal build, with his arm is around his wife and fits under there just nicely. His hair is a mess. He doesn't have a lot of teeth. His clothes are threadbare, pulling back the jawline. And as Marcus eyes look. And she starts to ask him about his night. Now they're standing in front of a house that my father reminded me that I hadn't seen in many occasions, and you wonder if we really care for each other, why people or allow people to live. That's Ben Cohen's Bibles called Rectangle Poet and Master Privacy. But as it turns out, he doesn't even have that. He's sharecropper, but he's been sick. So they've been kicked out of their home because if you can't work, you can't stay in the house. Of course, you can work in those houses. But he was talking about Christmas was coming, and when I talk to his kids, and when I take care of his kids, and he was going to do this, and he was going to do that. And it just began to feel sad. I started thinking about the days when I directed Meet the Press, and if you came onto that show, people came onto that show wanting to be impressive. That's why they came on Meet the Press. They had a point to make. We have a whole group of people, media trainers in DC, who train people to come on your show. And when they leave, they know that their interview is going to remain on videotape. Now it's going to remain online. And people will judge them. They want to be smart. They want to be thoughtful. They want to be power brokers. They want people to feel like when they have seen them on Meet the Press, that they actually need them. They're so powerful and so instructive and all that kind of stuff, and they leave with respect. And people look at them with respect. I was looking at this man, and he is all of a sudden trying to pull out big words that he is heard in the air and they don't match the sentence. You know he's using God. He's desperately trying to make himself seem relevant. I start to think back in the late 1960s at the Memphis sanitation workers were wearing these big placards. I am a man with Sarah. And I was watching this guy, and everything he said, even if it came out wrong, his body language was saying, see me, I'm trying to tell you I'm human, I'm trying to tell you I'm a man, I'm trying to tell you I'm worthy of your respect when you see me. But you remember when I told you that the author told me that the words are deeper than what you see? So I was looking at it and I was hearing him say those words, but I felt that even he didn't believe that he was a man in that moment. And the whole time he was struggling to make himself worthy of the arguments. This wife was fine. She cried a little more. She cried a little more. She cried a little more until she couldn't take it. She walked up the street. And it was devastating for me, so I couldn't even imagine what it was like for him. And I can't even imagine knowing that that piece of video of me would remain on YouTube for people to see me and that being in that struggle. But keep watching. I find that a young mother has to be mid to late 20s. There are kids around her. She also is in a dilapidated home. She also is poor dental work, Latin listening to. And the kids have no control over the King's English. You know? I started to think about my children and the advantages my children had. And I compare it to what these kids had. And I think the kids were right. They all came into the world with no choice. One ends up in the luck of unconditional love and the ability to give them a good life, and the other ends up here. And now they're in a situation where what sociologists refer to social debt. And what that means is they have created a bubble of poverty here. And the rest of us, including me, we go on with our lives and subconsciously, maybe we see these people as less than human, which is why we are able to allow them to live these visions. It's called social debt. And so now these kids are going to be, the wheels turn, and they will become the sharecropper. They will become the lady in the next generation. So now I had several life goals. I knew the legacy I wanted to leave. I knew the communities that I would call in Mississippi. I had a sharecropper, I had the lady, I had the children who were functionally illiterate in my mind. When childhood literacy is such a big thing to me, you'll find it in both of those books. Something like 8 billion or 8.5 billion we were. And he's in trouble. He was a star, he was a superstar in all the business, so, but now his star has been dull because he's in tax trouble and there's some security and exchange commission thing going on. And there's a chance that he might have to serve some time. Or I can't read. And I come to a place where they're talking about him in Morehouse College the year before. He stands up and he's speaking. And he's talking about how the kids have done, and it was hard work they've done, and he said, guess what? Everybody here who has any debt associated with their education, about paying it off, you would graduate debt. It cost him like $34 million. And I kept thinking, well, it can't be all bad. Right? So I had a conversation with my daughter, Julia, and we were really tight, and we talked about the last thing we had done that, was something special, especially when we had gone to Ryan Stevenson of the Vegan Justice, which is Steve. And in his talk, he said, we are all more than the worst thing we've ever done. And I stopped listening to it. I blanked out like I did. I turned down the radio at the beginning of the point, but for a different reason. Because this whole idea that we are more than our worst thing, that there's a possibility for redemption, was something I've always wanted to write about anyway. I love the notion of writing about redemption. And could we be redeemed in a world where social media that just follow us anyway. Is that possible today? To outlive or to live down the negative things that could be happening? I don't. And so I had this idea that redemption could go into this community. What if redemption was finding a way to help this community? And now, oh wait a minute, I got Robert Smith. I got this failed billionaire who now becomes the skeleton for Mr. Jim. Now all of a sudden I've got the main character. Now, Robert Smith's life is vastly different from the life I've lived with Mr. Jimmy. Their problems are different. Their kind of philanthropy is different. The kind of kindness is more emphasized and more nuanced with Mr. Jimmy. But I thank Robert Smith that day for showing me what I could begin to build. But I needed one more time. I knew by now it couldn't just be, it had to be the village. I believe in the village. When I was a young boy growing up in my town, I never saw any homeless people. Now, I recognize that Smithville, Virginia is not New York City, it's not LA, it's not Chicago. It doesn't have a number of people or the problem. But I'm talking about the mission of the village, the heart of the village. So if you lost your job at a packing plant in my hometown, or if you lost your job doing other things, churches would step in. They paid your rent. Or in many cases, like my church, they built a whole apartment building behind the church to make it easier for people to make it who were struggling. That's the kind of village I wanted to represent in Mr. Jimmy from Brown Lake. There's a white character, a woman named Olivia Fitzgerald, that is in this book purpose to work with Mr. Jimmy to show what we can do when we set aside filters that keep us from seeing each other, and what we can do and how we can make a difference in each other's lives. And there's a point, and for all of us, where I think we know deep down inside of us that those filters don't really matter, that we can get rid of them when necessary. I was on 95, north of New York City, with my wife and 2 kids. It was at night. I like to drive at night, so there's less traffic. And in front of us was a white van that all of a sudden started swerving from lane to lane, and then from lanes to lanes, and then at a certain point turned up on 2 wheels, slammed on his side, and skidded off onto the shoulder of the road. Now, by now, people had stopped on 95 because people were trying not to get hit by it. I get out of my car, the other people get out of their car, and we are running to the van. Here's what I didn't know, and I don't think anybody else knew, when we were running to the van. I didn't know whether that person was black or white. I didn't know if that person was Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Buddhist, or Hindu. I didn't know if that person was gay or straight. I didn't know if that person was Democrat or Republican. What I knew in that moment instinctively, like knowing I should breathe when I'm born, was that a human life was at risk in that baby. Instinctively, I know that a human life is worth something. It's worthy to be here and have the opportunity to have the best life possible. And what my parents told me just happened instinctively. It's your duty to get out of that car and run to see what you can do. And it wasn't just you. There were all these people on 95 who I didn't know, didn't look like me, didn't look like me. In that moment, we were all feeling the same thing, which lets me know that no matter where we come from, if we can see each other's humanity, if we can get past away things, we can do something to help each other. And so that's when the village comes in. That's what I'd like to bond. I'd like to be able to give it to everybody. That moment in time, nothing else mattered except I'm trying to save a human life. Don't show up any difference. That's what Mr. Jimmy was trying to do big. So when you finish reading Mr. Jimmy, if you read it, I would like you to first sit with the good stuff that's happening. Now, I've talked a lot about poverty and the things that are occurring in this book are things I want us to think about and how we debate them. But there's also a lot of love, there's laughter, there's joy, there's so much kindness. in this book. But then I do want you to think about the people Ham has to say, and the people that Mr. Jemmy works to help them to empower their lives. I want you to think of a line that I steal readily from the UN mission statement. Every human being is born free and equal in dignity and rights. Every human being is born free and equal with dignity and rights. And I would love it that if you finish this book, you're going to and go out into the world and try in your own way to make Black trades a reality. Thanks. And I'm happy for any questions you might have helpful or television news.
The line that you read it.
Yes.
How did he turn out?
I have never seen Joe since, but my daughter, when she was a teenager, my kids would always go on at some point in the summer, spend a week or so with my parents. My daughter was in the grocery store with her mother, and this man came up to her and said, "This one you recovered me." And she said, "I'm sorry, sweetie, I don't know." And he told her, I'm Jonathan. And he had 2 children with him. And he explained that he was doing really well. And that he thanked her for that. And I never told my daughter that story. So for me, it was wonderful that they heard it, that she went home and had her grandparents tell her that story. And she heard about kindness, the kind of actness of kindness or experience about from the horses. So I've never seen these things, but that was one time that my mom walked into her that he told her we stood well. He thanked her. Yeah, it's good. So that's this name.
So I looked at the last these days, talk ready to be taught.
Well,
Can
thank
you
you.
speak louder, please? I love his book because they talk great and I don't know if you is movie options.
Yeah, moving options, I hope so. I never like to say anything until it happens because I don't want to jinx myself. But there are conversations. Yeah, it's with them.
After you can. The person that you learn to think of, you get survived. Is it a medical?
It was a medical thing. And we didn't know when we got there, there was gas or oil or something leaking. So we decided not to wait for the rescue squad. We climbed up, we cut him out, lifted him out of the door, and took him. And it was a medical thing. So we had lost consciousness. That's what lies were. But he was saved. He was saved.
This isn't directly about it, but you are talking about generations being taught by.
Yes.
Hey, tell me about this children. What do they do?
Generation being taught in kindness. What are my children? Let me start with my daughter. She's the oldest. So when she was in 9th grade, at school that I know, there. She was the head of something called Monday Night School. And what that was my kids went to independent school, private school, a very good private school. And there were kids from these public schools who would come on Monday nights, younger school, and they would be. Well, my daughter I was reading to a boy, and he grew up in Washington, D.C. And it was about the time where we were celebrating Martin Luther King's birthday, and she was talking to me about Martin Luther King, and she mentioned the March on Washington and I would say speech. And he never seen it. And here was a boy, a preteen, who grew up in Washington, D.C., who'd never seen it. So she told us a story, and she said, look on his face said, once she showed him to the road, I didn't know like you would do that. And so she gathered her group of friends together, and they recognized that they needed to do more than just read stories. So she took a job that summer working at a local bookstore in a children's bookstore so she could educate herself about books and everything. Over the summer, she and her group of friends who ran on Unite Tutoring wrote 2 textbooks, like 2 different reading guides for the kids that they would do tutoring with in the fall of next year. Joy went to Princeton, which is why Princeton is important. She did Teach for America. She taught for 3 years in Brownsville and Brooklyn, which if you know Brooklyn, you know that's now. Yes. And then she taught at a chip school in Washington, D.C. And she has always been about helping children learn. She recognizes the blessing that she has can grow. And she works on that system. She's very powerful. She's a good person. She's got a big one. We're very proud of her son as well. He's a musician. And he plays fiddle, banjo, guitar, and he travels, lectures on the participation of African American and Native Americans in traditional American music. That we don't know things like the banjo is actually West African tradition, and that we don't know that a lot of the songs that we're assigned to other folks were actually played basically by Native Americans in Africa. So that he lectures in the frameworks and he's back. So he has a mission, and he does that well. We were lucky enough that we got to sit in the box seat at the Dome in New York and watch him walk out onto the stage and find it all. So he's done very well. And they both, there's a picture I carry of my son in my phone where he was playing an event and we had a break and he's outside of the door and a little girl comes up, maybe she's 1.5 or 2. And he kneels down in front of her with him. But the parents took the picture and offers the little girl the banjo that he's about this, I'm going to play. And I carry that picture all the time because this speaks to his heart and this icons crazy heart. Then they got it, passed on from me to them and to them. My wife is insane, even at heart no insurance. She has a really good heart, but my kids were touched incredibly by my memories. Then they are right extraordinary that each of the last things.
And just not just the story over was your parents, it's because of them that they were loving.
Oh, I think so. It's because of my parents the way I'm right. Absolutely, absolutely. I think, like I said, they said I have a duty to witness and then just stand up and do some trials. Well, I know that I always use Margaret Atwood and said a word after word after word is power. When I was a public reporter in my hometown newspaper, Mr. Edwards, the publisher, said to me, Trevor, you write an article, even in Smithfield, and you can influence and influence tens of thousands of people by So I recognize what my wife was able to do as a correspondent, the stories she did that made differences. And so I realized that both have that same power. We were up in Sinclair Road in Jungle, and because of that, there was he changed legislation of the country. And the FDA exists because that being wrote one. So I know the power of literature, and I decided that, one way I can, particularly with this book, extend what I learned from my parents and leave as a legacy. Someone asked me the other day, what is the difference in terms of your legacy, television or books, or more important to you? And I said, the books are more important to me because that I'm speaking from my heart, that I'm not working in DC, but by creating stories for somebody else or helping make new shows look better. This is something I want to leave. That when I'm gone, if anybody questions what I stood for, they'll be able to read my books and know.
I recognize
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I help it. I tell when you were writing and you created the, is this fun to play tempo? Like that, they
When I'm writing, is it fun to have things happen to the villain? I'm writing characters, it's fun, right? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because Villain certainly help you make your points. And there is definitely a villain in this story. And when I was doing my research for the story, I was talking to my friend Slim in Lost Point, Mississippi, who's a columnist, and he was saying to me, you gotta have this one bad guy in one town, a small town. It's like a really small town, really city. And that one guy, it has to, Mr. Jimmy's gonna end up knocking his that guy somehow because he runs the place. And what's that gonna look like? And that was a great conversation that created the character well done. And yes, it was fun to write him. And it's even more fun when you see people who read it who write like a review on Amazon and say, they were so glad he got his and we did it right.
You get right the comedy, then they
Did I write comedy? I'm the least funny person. No. If comedy happens in my book, and it does, it happens like it happens in a conversation, it's impromptu, it just occurs. Like I'll be writing something and this phrase will come out and I'll laugh a little bit myself and I know, I did something because I've always been a reader of, heavy drama or books, and if I've had the opportunity to read something fun or read Beloved, I'm going to read Beloved just because I like the passion in these stories. And I just don't think I have that capability.
thank you so much. I read that book like over a long weekend. I just couldn't put it down. It was just so good.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, I really got the can he get the was. If there could be a light coming through at any point in the story, I thought instead of having that from the beginning where you had this vision, because you talked about COVID where he went and hid himself.
Yes.
COVID.
Yes, he was trying to hide himself. There was no COVID in the book, but he was trying to hide himself. Yeah. It's like when you get yelled at by your parents or your kid, or you run to your room and get under this cover to hold your bear or whatever. And Mr. Jimmy, when he fell from grace, he did the same thing. I happened growing up in a small town with a preacher father, and he runs to Mississippi because it's like going to his bedroom, very rural place, and he hopes nobody can find it.
And his light was shining. He just could hold that light in.
Yes.
As much as he could, and the boys came by, he was teaching to read.
Yes.
I skipped up at the sea, and I thought that's wonderful. I think that.
And you're right, you can't, and that's a point that's purposely there. So the book begins, and I won't tell you too much if you haven't read it, but it begins with him and seeing a lady outside the post office who's unmarried. Throughout the book, I keep going back to the influence of his parents, and like my parents, in creating that kind of philanthropy in his heart. And so no matter how much he didn't want to be in college, by this time he's like, you can't deny his heart. You can't deny the foundation that they built. And that's what, with generational wealth is about more than just money. So that's what I'm trying to say. Good.
So I love what you did with the whole notion of literacy and education in the book. And I would like to say if there was some way for you to write a novel that encompasses systemic like education in a way that shines a light on that. Because sometimes people always think, well, why don't these parents stand up for what they should get for their children? And I know you say, well, sometimes you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And so I really would just shine a light on literacy was what you trying to say. And I hope that you continue that.
I will continue that, and you just make a great point. That's what I was talking about. These kids are going into this world, and you don't know what you don't know. Even Michelle Obama in her book Becoming talks about not knowing on the, I can't remember what she refers to them as cables or levers that you can pull. If you grew up in a family where your kids have access and they have, art studies program in a family where both parents were journalists and who were attached in the community, and so they could see, I can connect here, I can connect here, I can connect here, and help myself. In this situation, these kids, there's nothing. Their parents don't even know that there are levers that they can pull, and the kids have absolutely no idea that there are levers that they can connect. And they will never know unless somebody steps into that community to guide them. So you're 100% right. And but the emancipation of the walls is about a very, very different kind of struggle with education. But I have written about that. But I could see writing something because education meant everything to my parents. When they got married and they said their 3 boys, no matter what, will have college education. And they put themselves all kinds of debt and everything else to make sure that happened. So, no, I've actually
Not in the
okay.
it just became an idea pharaoh.
Yes, it's right. We just
And
have,
we all spurred you and it's like,
we just have light bulb.
you opened our hearts to all of it. Yeah.
Two words.
Yeah, but that's
Thank you all very much.
team when we were in the press.
Yes.
St. Russell, Haran was it because I had heard him treated my son's graduate school in Florida. I was very impressed with it. A lot of things he should work with
I did. I was the intention of the show. I was already directing. And so I directed, I think I did 9 years in charge before I left. He was a what, you mean journalist? Yes, yes, person, yes. Well, we listened. We listened for many reasons. I think that he would light in where we are now. Yes. And this is the best. Because people had to come on that show and they had to be held accountable no matter who they were. I saw Democrats and Republicans, they still much from that table to tears practically. He did his research. He was on his game, and he felt there was a mission to he felt there was an honor to be able to sit in that chair and carry on the legacy of the press, and he treated it as such. And so, it was really good to be a part of that. We went from cat collar to hour. We went from an afterthought to the ones with no competition here in Toby Tanks. So, Egypt will.
Speaking of Mr. Russell, I've heard that he did his research that, because I remember Obama saying something was Tim Russell would find it an obscure sense you made
Yes.
15, 20 years earlier, and he would bring it up.
Yeah, well, he did. I can tell you, like on Fridays, he would go into hibernation with huge packets of research, and then by Sunday morning, we'd have a meeting together. We would talk about how he envisioned the show going. He was a lawyer before he came into world journalism, and so he believed that phrase that a good lawyer never asks a question if he doesn't have some idea what the answer is going to be about it. And so one example was we would have a segment, and he would say from his research, so-and-so said this, so I'm going to ask this question, and he's probably going to go here. If he doesn't go here, we're going to pull this out to show that there's a problem here. We're not connecting. So we would go through each segment that way, based on what he was intuiting what happened. So he was way down, in the weeds in detail. I will tell you that a lot of it, Tim was also good in listening to what was happening around him. So you brought out about the question of him, like pull up a graphic or something that says, you said this on this day, or pulling up a piece of videotape and saying, you said this on this day. Well, that all started from a guy named Jim Bornheim, who was a cameraman on me. And Tim would come on the set. When Tim came on the set, all he would do was we would just interview. And Jim Bornheim would say, Jim, Bob Dole said this on Monday. Look, put that on the air. And at first, we all laughed at Jim, because Jim always had lots of ideas. Well, so-and-so said that, pull that out of the New York Times and put that on the air. And after a while, Tim started, that's a good idea. And so that one camera guy, Jim Bornheim, helped change the press too, and helped get something for channel, who was able to see that and carry it forward. So, and in fact, Jim then changed the whole Sunday morning of talk show line, because nobody did that. So we started first, and then the ABC, CBS, CNN, everybody else started. So, it was a fun time. That career was great for me. I mean, I grew up at one farm on the field talking to myself, and the next thing I know, I'm in the Oval Office talking to presidents. And it was quite a journey. And my parents, I would tell you, have done a lot of things. But one of the proudest moments I could think of from my parents, at a small farm in the church kindergarten, a big teacher, they came to watch me direct the show. And I'm walking down the hall, and we see coming towards me is Andrea Mitchell and Colin Powell. Now, Andrea is a colleague of mine, a dear friend from way back when we launched Mr. Jimmy. She was right there, being brought to celebrate. But that day, when we met them in the hall, I introduced my parents to Andrea. But the thing that touched them more than anything was that the Secretary of State, Colin Powell, reached out his hand to me and said, "Hi, Jeffrey, how you doing?" That their son, that the Secretary of State, meeting their son, always by name, meant more to them always than any television show. So it was a great career. And working on the press return was a highlight of that career.
You have a chance to studies journalism.
I would suggest,
For journalism,
Yeah.
TV,
I would say we need a whole hour and a half. But I would say this, my wife and I are often, we have conversations often about where we feel the journalism, where we actually stream on TV a lot. And I would just say that there are very few spaces that we feel the journalism that we were taught focus today. Today there's a lot of opinion. It doesn't matter which network you watch, there's a lot of opinions. People are making snide remarks and closing their eyes and stuff with the angles, and we just wouldn't. That's just not something that we would do. And I think it's a rating space thing. Still, we have to, they got to make money, they got to have ratings, and that's part of the deal. So we watch at night, PBS News on the laws, and because we feel like they're the closest that we can. And I would say the evening newscasts are still trying, because there isn't a lot of time for opinion. You go into a story, you come out, going into a story, coming out, that kind of thing. But when you're watching the 24-hour, even the 24-hour broadcast, it's hard to watch sometimes because it's just opinion that keeps you back. It's theater, and that's just a way of putting it. And for those old school journalists, we find it. Yeah.
Same here, Sunday morning, spoken, what you run this part, with that program.
I have not, but I work with Jane.
Yeah.
I work with Jane a lot. No, and
This is be a great, we work Sunday morning
yes,
has our
sure, yeah.
because we get much from many of their Sunday be a part of one of those Sunday mornings. So it's that will help risk entry your way with sport.
Thank you. I hope so too. I was on NPR for Evan Balls, and that will probably happen. So we're trying to get something there. But we have a long ways to go yet with Mr. Jimmy, and a lot of opportunity to spoke out there. Thank you. But I love to see this in partnership too.
So let's say Charles Eckford.
What's that?
From also Charles Eckford.
Yes. I did not know Charles Osborne, but my wife she actually worked.
Mr. saying we can't get the parts building now to use our book.
Well, this is why. So there's two reasons why I wrote that once I discovered Barbara Smith, I decided instead of just making him like a millionaire or something, I wanted to make him building. One, because I used to go to speak in DC public schools to work on DC CAP, and I would go to speak to African American and Latino students. And I would go in, like a lot of other professionals, it wasn't just me, we would go in, so they would see that there were other opportunities. So I would ask every time I went, what do you see yourself doing? Entertainer, actor. And why? Because that's where we see people make for a reason build a house, we have a family. That's the only place you see that. And I said, well, I'm here to tell you that there are options. And I had questions like, well, do you make as much money as the bond? So,
Who does?
who does? But so I said, no, but I live a comfortable life, and I don't want for things, and I can take care of my family, and there's something to be said for that too. But when I was writing this, I was envisioning some of those kids old enough now to maybe read this book, and to think about the fact that you can become a billionaire, you can become a businessman. A black person can be in the same conversation as Bill Gates. Maybe not as many billion, but still good billion. You can make that. And not only you're not wrong, but you can buy the team that lost Gates. Right? So there is a reason why I did that. And the second reason is my publicist boss, she said, Jeff, this is your gold cap. It isn't my intention for people who have this kind of money to see what they can do in these areas. Now, I am very thankful for folks like Maggie Johnson, who went into neighborhoods where there was nothing and built indicators and gave people jobs. Now, those jobs, a lot of those jobs were minimum wage jobs, but people still have an opportunity to work where they couldn't. What Mr. Jemley is trying to do is to create generational wealth, going in and showing people what they have inside of them that they can turn into art. I was talking to a group of kids and I was saying, when they were trying to figure out how this topic wouldn't mean that you could have something inside of you that turns into something bigger than you expect. So I had a Google right there. I said, Google, how many CEOs of Fortune 500 companies don't have a college degree? They were shocked.
Yeah.
What did they have? They started at the bottom. And 25 years later, they're running a Fortune 500 company. And they don't have a business. That's what we have. We just have to look at yourself, believe in yourself, and figure out what it is that you can sell on the market, know about yourself. And that's what successful people like Mr. Jennings can go in their business and say. And that's what he sees in these characters and what he's able to do is to empower when you see what somebody has within themselves to use for that power. So I'm hopeful that people with money will see that this isn't just about giving money to the United Way or something like that. You have the power to go into a neighborhood and actively change lives for better. Even one, I'm trying to think of his name now. I can't remember his position. He played for Tampa Bay, and he started a nonprofit. And so what he did was he would find families and he would give them a house. He was finding out would go out house. He was running back for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So here's a guy with an enormous amount of wealth. He decided that he would not come live in for housing. I can make it happen that I can put families in laws, and I'm going to do it. So Mr. Jimmy is my intentional roadmap. One, for kids to see what they can become, and what other people can see to have the money to work on, or they can do to offset a circle and human beings and youth. Thank you very much.